Canada's retaliatory auto tariffs are now in place on vehicles coming from the United States that do not comply with the Canada-U.S.-Mexico agreement. Canada imposed the 25% levy on fully assembled cars and trucks at 12:01 Eastern Time. And vehicles that are CUSMA compliant are also being taxed at the same rate, but only for their non-Canadian and non-Mexican parts. It's the latest escalation in the trade war between the U.S. and Canada. And President Trump is also turning up the temperature on global tariffs. A 104% duty on goods from China is now in effect as well. And that is once again sending markets into another slump this morning. And William Pellerin joins us now for more on this latest round of tariffs. He's a partner at Macmillan LLP in Ottawa and a co-lead of the firm's international trade team. He also spent 6 years at Global Affairs Canada working on international trade disputes, making him uniquely perfect for this conversation this morning. Thank you so much for joining us from Ottawa.
Chris, my pleasure.
So as I was just reporting, Canada is now imposing its own 25% counter tariffs on vehicles that are imported into the country that are non-CUSMA compliant. The auto industry already getting hammered, of course. We've seen that plant, the Stellantis plant in Windsor, temporarily closed down due to all of this. How do you think this is going to impact the industry and the workers?
This is a really, really difficult situation. The automotive industry was not built for tariffs or any type of border even as between Canada and the United States. So this is a complete rethink of the supply chains that currently exist. It is a very difficult time for the automotive industry, probably more hit than anybody or any other sector here now today.
How quickly do you think it's going to be before plants, those temporary shutdowns turn into permanent shutdowns?
I think that's probably a company-by-company difficult decision to have. I think it's probably a few weeks or months away. I think in the short term, it's probably rejigging and trying to find supply. Probably a lot of temporary shutdowns as some of the goods dry up and alternative sources are found or not found. I think the bigger question is, as you point out, what happens to the investment decisions on a go-forward basis if these tariffs are with us for more than a few weeks? I think that fundamentally that question as to what happens after the Canadian election, whoever's prime minister sits down with President Trump, and are we able to renegotiate a full sale deal?
I gather some consumers are hoping that companies are going to be able to absorb some of this, but what do you think this is all going to do to prices for autos here in this country?
I think auto prices have to go up at this point. I don't see a way around it. The supply chains are too integrated, and there's too much at stake here. So I don't think the automotive industry can absorb this very long. Maybe prices stay the way they are for a few more days or a few more weeks, but ultimately with a large-scale tariff like this, prices are going to have to go up.
Yikes. Okay. And given what you were just talking about how interconnected the auto industry is across North America, how difficult is it to determine what is exempt or non-CUSMA compliant? What are you hearing from your clients, for example?
It's incredibly complicated. I know this is a term that we're tossing around when we're talking to you and to other media outlets in terms of making a good CUSMA compliant. With respect to the auto industry specifically, that is incredibly complicated. So you have to understand the origin of the parts, how much content there is that is developed or assembled or manufactured in North America, and then build your way up through that vehicle to understand whether the vehicle as a whole qualifies for that special USMCA CUSMA rule of origin. So the automotive industries have a lot of people working on this. They bring in external consultants that all they do is rules of origin with respect to automotive industry. And they're trying to work their way through these calculations to make sure that their goods continue to qualify now more important than ever because of these massive tariffs on both sides of the border.
And this is no longer, of course, a North American issue. This has gone global. Trump's country-specific tariffs are now in effect, including, of course, that 104% tariff on China. And while Canada was left off that particular list, Canadian businesses could still be impacted if they import goods from U.S. suppliers that were originally made in China, I understand. So what are you hearing from your clients about that piece?
Yeah, so I think what we're going to see is one of the greatest trade diversions of all time, right? If goods cannot go into the United States because the United States has imposed a massive tariff wall, those products have to go somewhere. Chinese products, Vietnamese products, Malaysian products that are hit with massive tariffs going into the United States are going to be looking for a new home. And so I think at some point we're going to start seeing a large swath of large flood potentially in different sectors of global products that are ending up here in Canada because this remains an attractive market with a consumer that can pay. Maybe not a replacement for the U.S. consumer, but as close as it gets, frankly. So I think that's probably the biggest piece that we're about to see. And beyond that, there's so much work that needs to be done by Canadian businesses to really understand fundamentally what goods are being hit. What are the tariff classifications? What are the codes on Canada's retaliation list? And what is the origin of that good? Because as I mentioned, that is not as simple as saying the good comes from this country, therefore it gets hit with that country's tariff. It really goes fundamentally to the identity of the good, what's known as the origin of the good. So Canada currently imposes tariffs or special tariffs on U.S. goods, but that doesn't mean that just because a Vietnamese product went to the United States that it's going to be hit by a tariff. In fact, that's not the case at all. Only U.S. goods or U.S. manufactured goods are going to be hit by Canada's tariffs.
It's all really kind of head spinning, actually, when you just lay it out like that. What are your clients saying in terms of how they're trying to guard against that and track all of that?
Yeah, that's exactly, why they call us, to have these discussions, to set them straight, to make sure that they're running the calculations properly, that they're looking at their products line by line, product code by product code, in order to understand whether they've properly done this in the past. And here's the difference. Companies had to do this for many, many years. The issue is that in most cases, the duties were always zero, and so people were not being careful or cautious or getting their customs classifications right and understanding all of these different rules, because ultimately it didn't matter. You get it wrong, it's still 0% at the border. Now, getting it wrong can be the difference between a 25% tariff or no tariff. And so everyone's scrambling to redo all of the analysis or to actually do it for the first time in some cases.
Now, this week, Canada initiated a World Trade Organization dispute regarding the U.S. auto tariffs. What kind of an impact do you think that might be able to have?
Frankly, not much of an impact at all. I think that's a statement that Canada wants to make. The World Trade Organization is unfortunately, in respect to the United States, somewhat defunct, doesn't really work anymore because the what's known as the appellate body, which is the Supreme Court of the World Trade Organization, has been blocked from new appointments by the United States. And so these cases can't be heard once they're appealed from a panel decision. So the United States has actually, blocked the world body's ability to review these types of cases. And so Canada knows that we're going to go through the process, likely win, frankly, at the WTO panel, and the United States will appeal into the void of a non-functioning review court. And so what that means is that this will not serve to resolve the issue. It's more of a political statement to show that Canada stands by the rules of international trade and that the United States does not.
Wow. Okay. That's kind of discouraging. All right, William. Well, thank you for joining us on the program this morning. I appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
William Pellerin is an international trade lawyer at Macmillan LLP, and I'm Chris Glover. You're watching CBC Morning Live.